As a pastor, and oftentimes during my pastoral career, I've also served as youth pastor, and find myself back in that role once again with the gray hair, and actually went on past the gray. Now it's white, but I still love kids, young people. I do. And one of the things that I have become very keenly aware of is that there is a battle for the hearts and minds of these young ones. And to understand that this battle is so intense that when the enemy comes against them, he brings much confusion for them. And unfortunately, so often in our churches, they're getting bits and pieces of the gospel and not a full understanding and study of the words of Christ and the concepts of the Holy Spirit and what the Holy Spirit does and how the Father works and how the Son works and how it all works toward the eventual salvation of an individual. And then you also have to throw in there the tremendous things that are happening in their own personal space, in their bodies, in their relationships, with their dealings with their household. All of these things are all working in the hearts and minds of these young people. And so you say, well, Pastor, how do we deal with this? What do we do? Well, it's very, very important that as we've been studying this week about the sower who went forth to sow, and Jesus used this terminology, that they may know the mysteries of the kingdom. And one of the things that I've sought to point out during this week is that this whole thing that Jesus is talking about here, about the sowing of the word, the sower that went forth to sow, the reapers, the world, the end of the world, this is all driven by the Spirit of God. In other words, it's the Spirit of God that brings the seed to be sowed. And I pointed this out so many times now on the broadcast, as how that Jesus said to Nicodemus, you must be born again. In other words, there has to be a spiritual happening in this young person's life, because the pressures that's coming against them is so strong and so intense. This whole thing called peer pressure, it is crazy powerful. And if the young person is not in tune with their spiritual self, they'll find themselves falling prey to all of these things. And they'll find themselves seeking after things that brings carnal fulfillment. But we know it's empty, and we know that it has no lasting effect. I think back to when I was a young man living during those days. And we're talking about the 60s and the 70s, and it was tough then. I can imagine what some of these young people are dealing with now. That's why they need to have the understanding of the enlightenment. That's the work of the Holy Spirit. This is Pastor Jack King with the gospel on the radio broadcast.